It's getting warm. Bernie, would you mind shutting the doors if we need to? I was just letting it in while the air was cool. Feels good? Is that what you say? Yeah. All right. Let me get our questions out. So here is our questions for chapter 14. We'll do a little review of that before we move on. All right, the first question. After the visions of chapter 12 and 13, which 12 is Satan's war on the Jews, and chapter 13 describes the two beasts who Satan will use to accomplish that war. So now we see John's vision turn to the victory of Jesus Christ. Who is standing with him in this? Okay, the 144,000 are first described as standing with him. And who are the 144,000? 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes are standing with him. These are Jewish men who we've discussed several times before, and these are the ones that are standing with him. Where are they at, and why would they be in that particular place? Okay, Mount Zion, or the other name that's often used? Mount Moriah, and we call it the Temple Mount area, and many things have happened on that area. Tell me some of the things that have happened there. Temple Mount. There you go. So both temples, Solomon's temple, and then the temple that was during, enlarged during the time of Herod, the one Jesus would have gone to. Both temples there. Interestingly enough, both of them destroyed on the 9th of Av. Both temples on the exact same day, destroyed all those many hundreds of years apart. So that is a very important place. Tradition teaches us that that is the area where Abraham may have offered Isaac on the foundation stone. Do you know much about the foundation stone? Just an interesting little side note here. So the foundation stone sits under the dome of the rock. It's why it's called the Dome of the Rock. It sits on the foundation stone, what is believed to be the area that traditionally, now, so there's no, I can't tell you for sure, but traditionally the teaching is that that is where Abraham would have offered Isaac. It also would have been the foundation stone is traditionally believed to be where the Ark of the Covenant sat. And today it sits under the Dome of the Rock, a Muslim site, and sits directly on top of what is known as the Well of the Souls, where all of those who are waiting for the judgment time and their time to go on. So a great deal of history there, and important to both faiths, but definitely a strong Jewish connection there to that. And so if the, yeah. Underneath the foundation stone is a place called the Well of the Dead, or the Well of the Souls. And it's just a place where the Muslims believe that the souls go to as they wait for eternity to begin. So you can see why the fighting is so intense.
Didn't
there.
They also say that Muhammad touched off there when he went
They
to
did.
heaven?
They did. They believe that Muhammad, although nothing in the Quran talks about him leaving from Jerusalem. It doesn't ever mention the name of Jerusalem. And so they have inserted that in there. And even up to 75 years ago, there were writings in the Muslim writings that discuss the fact that that foundation stone was where the temple stood, where the temple was. And so back then, everyone agreed that that's where it was. Now there's just the fighting over whether it ever even existed, whether there was ever even a temple there. So this is a very critically important place in Jewish history. Not surprising that Jesus and the 144,000 in John's vision are seen standing there in this critically important place. So, go ahead.
Are the 144,000 the remnant? They're not the remnant.
They're what we called last week the first fruits. Maybe that's what you're thinking, is the first fruits, because they are the ones who were taken from the Jewish people during this tribulation period as first fruits for what was to come. Now, I think we have often talked about the fact that the Jewish remnant comes to Jesus because it's not the overall Jewish people. In fact, we're told later that 2/3 of the Jewish people who are living during that time do not accept. It's a third who do. And so that's a huge number. I mean, if there's somewhere between 8 to 10 million Jews in Israel now, no telling how many will be there then. And so a third of that number is still a very large number of people who would be there. So it says, why do you think they are singing what is called a new song? This 144,000.
God's plan was completed.
Okay. God's plan was completed at this time. And so it is the first time that God's plan has been completed. And so it's a new song of praise and worship for the completed plan of God. Number 3, next we see 3 angels come into the vision. The first one will be preaching with a... How loud do you think an angel's voice is? Can you believe that it would be heard globally? I mean, how is that possible? We don't really know.
When Krakatoa erupted,
Yes.
they think it was like 2/3 of the way around the earth. They heard that reverberation.
Isn't that amazing?
So, yeah.
It's so amazing to think that the angels now are going to be being used in God's plan to reach out to other people. And what is he preaching?
The everlasting gospel.
Do you love that name? I don't know if you've never heard it before. It's such an amazing name, the everlasting gospel. And we talked last week about the fact that the gospel has always been the gospel throughout all of eternity. It was engineered, thought of, planned for, whatever word you want to use, before the earth was ever even created. The everlasting gospel has existed. And it is choose God. Choose God, choose his ways. Now, it shows itself in different ways throughout there. It looked different for Noah than it looked for perhaps Abraham, then it looked for Moses, then it looked as you go down the line when the Gospels occur and when Jesus is on the earth, and then after Jesus is resurrected and he goes back up into heaven. It's a whole new thing, right? Hi, Heidi. There's two over there you're going to want to get. And so the everlasting gospel changes with the dispensations that we're in. Dispensation only just meaning time periods that we're in. And so it looks different. Before the law came about, you didn't have to follow the law because it wasn't there. And then it looks different for the church age than it did for Moses or for Abraham. And so there's different criteria to the gospel. Just to be clear, what is our gospel today? Paul tells us.
To trust in Jesus, trust that he died on the cross for our sin and came alive again, and that we need him for redemption.
Absolutely. So Paul tells us very clearly, our gospel, he says, is the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And without that, we have nothing. And now, the death, burial, and resurrection was not the gospel for those who were living during the gospels when they were happening, or before then, because Jesus hadn't been born, he hadn't died, and he hadn't resurrected. So theirs was a different type of criteria, but it's always the same because it's always what? Choose God. Put your faith in God. And so again, here we are in a new dispensation of time as this angel is going over preaching the everlasting gospel, which is choose God. And what an appropriate time for him to be preaching this as all of these things are occurring on the earth, right? All right, so we talked about it. What is it? It's the good news. The gospel simply means good news. And the good news is choose God and his son at this time. And so in question 4, the second angel will give a warning. What is the warning?
Babylon is fallen.
Babylon is falling. Babylon is falling, he says. We didn't spend a lot of time in that because when we get to chapter 17 and 18, we're going to spend a lot of time on Babylon, what it actually means in these cases and what it represents. But he is out there letting them know that that is now falling. Bless you. Number 5, the third angel also gives a warning, and it's a very serious one. What is the consequence of taking the mark of the beast on the right hand or the forehead?
You can't have it removed once you choose it.
Okay.
And you'll drink the wine of the wrath of God.
Okay. So drinking the wine of the wrath of God, meaning that these people who take the mark are now forever lost. You can't scrub it off. You have to make a choice. When you take the mark, remember, no one's forced to take the mark. I know sometimes people fear that, but no one's forced to take the mark. The reason you take the mark is you say, yes, I want to stand with this establishment the Antichrist has. He seems to be helping us economically and politically, and things are going, he seems to be the leader of all of it. The signs and miracles of the false prophet are happening. Yes, we believe that this image, this abomination of desolation that comes alive, yes, it's him. I choose him. You have to make that choice. No one can come and put it on your forehead, hold you down, tie you down, and put it on your forehead, and then you're lost forever. You have to make that choice to have the mark stick.
The choice that they make is to continue to rebel. Because
Exactly.
we see over and over, in 16, they repented not of their deeds.
Right.
They repented not and gave God not glory. I mean, on and on. So it's not that they take the mark and then they regret it either.
Exactly.
They continue to rebel throughout the rest of the book.
Exactly. And it seems reasonable to me to believe that once they take the mark, then the Holy Spirit no longer even attempts to woo them back into a relationship because that time is over. For us right now, that time is over when we die. Up until that time, we have an opportunity to believe, but then once we die, we can't go back and do it. And so once you take the mark of the beast, then the wooing of the Holy Spirit to draw you into relationship, more than likely, it seems reasonable to believe that that's what will happen there. All right, so can you be forced or is it a choice? We talked about that. So what happens to those who take the mark? What does it mean when Holly said the wrath of the cup of God's wrath? What is it?
You're tormented with fire and smoke and continually no rest day or night.
Okay, tormented, you said what?
The full cup of God's indignation.
Okay, the full strength of the cup of God's indignation. All of that meaning what in our language today?
Judgment.
Hell, judgment. That they've now lost their soul, and they will spend eternity in a place of torment. All right, so number 6, why would it be a blessing to, quotation, die in the Lord from now on? Why is that a blessing?
You don't have to go through the bowl judgments.
Okay, you don't have to, they're not going to have to go through these bowl judgments that we're going to be discussing.
And they're likely martyred immediately.
M-
So they can move right on to heaven. They don't
Okay.
have to deal with all this other
Sometimes people have said, wouldn't it be easier at the moment of our salvation if God just took us? Because then you don't have to suffer anything. You're saved and you just immediately go into the presence of the Lord. Wouldn't that be cool? And so for these people, that is exactly what happens, more than likely for most of them. And so, go ahead.
It's new life.
Yes.
It's new life that we experience when we die.
Yes.
In worldly ways, we experience new life that's unspeakable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we just change our zip codes, right? And now we have a life that is in a new, much better than anything that we've had before. Even today, don't we say that it's a blessing to die in the Lord? As strange as that seems, it is a blessing when we die in the Lord, because that person, our loved one, obviously none of us have experienced that, but our loved one steps, once they enter into death, then they immediately step into the presence of the Lord. And so what a blessing for them. Now, of course, those of us who are left behind grieve as we do for the physical presence, but those who go on, what a joyous time. And I guarantee you that if we could communicate with them and say, would you like to come back? They'd say, we'll just wait right here for you. We'll just be waiting here for you when you come. All right, so number 7, verse 14 tells us that John sees one like the Son of Man. What is he, this one like the Son of Man, what is he about to do? Say that again.
Reap the harvest with a sickle.
Okay, so he's going to reap the harvest on earth, and he's going to use a sickle, which represents, we talked, judgment, sharp, swift judgment is going to happen. And so it is now time for judgment. So what is that kind of representing to us? Not kind of. What is that representing to us? It's time for the judgment. The time to make a choice is over. So this is obviously a vision at the very end of that 7-year period. The time is gone. You no longer have the ability to make a choice, and so judgment is at hand. And we read about that in the Gospels, in the parable of the wheat and the tares, and the different ones who God alone, the goats and the sheep, and God will know when Jesus comes to reap judgment, he will know those who he will reap judgment on, and the time to choose is over at that point. Number 8, the last portion of the chapter gives us disturbing details about the final judgment. What is about to happen? The wine press, isn't that a vivid painting of a picture to put into our mind? And so I told you what that was. What is the actual event? Okay, the Battle of Armageddon, or the conflict at Armageddon. Har Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo is where that is. I think in your packet today I gave you a picture of that because we're going to talk about it again, and so you'll have a little picture of the Valley of Armageddon when we get there. 9, how has God reached out to the people on earth to offer them an opportunity to avoid the deception of the Antichrist and the false prophet? What are the ways God has taken that everlasting gospel during the 7-year time period? Okay, the 144,000 is one, absolutely. They're out there evangelizing the world. The angels that are going globally, not just over Jerusalem, going globally.
Through his word, his son.
Okay. And the 2 witnesses. We've discussed those 2 witnesses that are preaching the everlasting gospel, for which they're eventually martyred and then taken back up and...
The witness of the patience of the saints who are keeping the commandment of God and the faith of Jesus.
Okay,
So there's
good.
still some people that are in that category.
Exactly. And so these are the ways God certainly, even during this late hour, this final week, as Daniel calls it, during this final time, God does not leave his people uneducated as to what's going on, and he certainly gives them opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to reach out to him. So if you ever have someone in a discussion who says, how could a God of love send people to hell? And why would he have this time of 7 years that everyone talks about where he just goes around punishing people all the time? Well, how could you worship a God who does that? Well, then I would ask them to reread this book, right? Because that is not at all what God does over and over and over again, even though he has every reason to establish justice on the earth and to punish those who continually rebel against him, like you mentioned, and all of that. He just continues to throw out opportunities, doesn't he? Please, choose life, choose me. I want you with me. And they continue to turn their back. That's not a God who hates his people, or it's a God who loves them so desperately that he's willing until the final moment to allow them to choose him.